Addendum Part 1. For centuries the religions have pushed their agenda of conquest and conversion through the use of their military and naval forces that were made to serve their ultimate purpose of conquering and practice on the conquest territories and its people to conversion to the one religion they represented. Became also practiced the destruction of holy sites and of the one of scripts and artifacts in order to eradicate the local culture and impose the new one. Another thing that became practiced by the mercenaries of the church was to label native not according to their origins, but instead by the color of the skin. The word indigenous is the spell that takes away the feeling of apartheid to the land. This was a system done to remove the concept of belonging to a land, but instead submitting the local people to be kept like animals, labeled Indians, not from their belonging to the land of India, but instead tied to an insane concept of inferiority, tied through the color of the skin. It is also known that all the first countries colonized by the Catholic Empire were subject to every form of injustice, and that the ways of the so-called settlers was far from the one expressed from the modern concept of Christianity. It is also known that the conquerors were told to invent horrifying stories regarding all colonies in order to prevent any other spiritual story beside the one been introduced from spreading. The Incas, Aztec, and Maya are also among those ancient civilization which was in reality not fighting wars or making bloody human sacrifices, but instead flourishing with the nature of their own continent in peace coexistence and exchange with each other. A main alleged reason to fabricate such terrible stories was to recruit more volunteers for the Crusades and justify the terrible use of force against the natives of the conquered colonies. Of course, not only the so-called Central and South American empires had been subjected to such a treatment, but also all the rest of places in the world which became subjected to the law of the monotheistic cults and their monarchic systems had suffered the same insanity. Through the many inquisitions that were unleashed by the various popes in the name of the so-called Catholic Empire, its society grew by means of terror and deception. By simply examining the history and using the logic, we can see that such systems of belief have been for long used to repress the consciousness of all. Everyone that has been thought of the existence of event as in something true uses them to create the reality around him or herself on the basis of its belief in him as the ultimate truth. Like so, man became subjected to its own perception of reality that because so far from the truth and logic that makes accept nonsense just because he is told it's true by the so-called institutions, gives life to the same fires that wants to destroy him. The wars of deception. For centuries Earth is being subjected to the manipulation of the belief system designed to inspire beings to an idea of righteousness in making wars for conquering lands and convert civilizations to what was told to be a more civilized system or religion. As we can see by examining the history, we can learn that such a concept was developed with the idea that such a practice was originally done by armies that was confronting each other on battlefields and engineered in the way to spare the life of the civilian populations and to spare the life of the combatant made prisoners. All wars that were seeing the attack of civilian populations were deemed as barbaric and savage, and to further convince the soldiers in the right to such illogic practice they were told to be noble and fight for the developing of society. Special laws were made to protect the civilian populations, and the use of indiscriminately and inhumane force on non-fighting people was forbidden. With the coming of the 20th century, such a law were soon forgotten, and with the developing of the weapons, the wars became again aimed to the mass obliteration of entire populations. A clear example of such practice became evident with the bombing of entire cities, like for example the World War II obliteration of Berlin and Dresden, where the civil population was deliberately attacked with chemical and incendiary bombs designed to destroy all. Further, we can study the use of more devastating weapons like the nuclear ones that were developed by the oligarchs for keeping people under fear in the reality of their insane game of destructive power shown to the world through the inhumane and horrific attacks perpetuated on Japan in the infamous bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We also learn through the history of the 20th and 21st century that the warfare developed into something even more inhumane than had ever been with the use of automatic guns and chemical like the Agent Orange and White Phosphor that was deliberately deployed on urban areas like, for example, in the Vietnam War and every war since then. Also by developing weapons able to shoot hundreds of bullets per second, clearly also the amount of indiscriminate devastation brought by them became even larger. In fact, the war machine became so devastating that entire nations became run by fear in what became known as Cold War. The implementation of such horrific wars became even more evident from the First Gulf War when the use of depleted uranium was also deployed, causing not only the immediate death of those first hit by, but also the genetic mutation of entire nations and the contamination of the planet with radioactive particles. After mankind became aware of the nuclear science, those in power then began to develop it not for the potential of goodness it can bring, like for powering machines able to allow to travel like it was originally meant, but instead for the creation of horrifying devices that can only bring more fear and destruction and not the peace and balance that people were told to believe they have been created for. Also tectonic weapon able to create earthquakes and truly uncontrollable weather modification that can result in hurricanes, tornadoes and even tsunami became used to further feed the destruction machine. Logically, because of the financing of wars and destructive machines, society was moved towards more insanity and unnatural ways, and clearly because of the development directed towards creating machine and devices designed to destroy and enslave society, the world had to come to face the demons they had created. It is also clear that in order to develop a society that will not destroy itself and its surrounding, it is basic understanding that example like the one that we can learn from through the history of Earth must be well assimilated in order to make sure that beings realize the truth and act according to what is right for the well-being of all, instead of falling into what is a world of illusion based on greed and deception. As we learn the history of Earth, we can see how another way used for inducing fear and constrain the mind of his inhabitants to a state of submission as being the one described as Cold War. For long it was believed that such a way of repression of the mind was harmless because of its practice was allegedly done to prevent the explosions of real wars, but in practice such an immoral tactic has been the main element for pushing the society towards more inhumane and devastating armaments and the expense of enormous resources, not for the well-being of the planet and his inhabitants, but instead only for the economical and personal conquest of the few who are against nature. We must also be aware of the facts from history that must be learned in order to find the solution that can prevent the repeating of mistakes. An example that we can learn from is the way how society had been hijacked and the influence that the money lords had achieved through the projection of their own world far away from nature and general well-being for the inhabitants of our planet Earth. The reason of such is explained in the realization of the type of indoctrination the ruling society had been subjected to. Such a society built on veneration of evil cannot survive its own creation, and if it does not change its acting will naturally become destroyed by the greater forces of nature. This is a factor that cannot be changed, so it becomes a duty of the living beings to make sure that such a society would be enlightened with the true understanding of the reality they have involuntarily created and given a chance to repair their misdeed. In order to learn from the mistakes, we must be made aware of the type of indoctrination to the Masonic system that have created the pyramid of deception that has for centuries kept imprisoned the planet. The structure of such a secret society was based on the idea of ruling the planet in a dictatorial fashion where only the ruling elite get psyched in a world of falsity based on the evil side of the monotheistic belief system and of the existence of supernatural entity that they call Lucifer, which had been for long secretly venerated by those that are the residing on the top of the pyramid structure. This as being the key for controlling the lowest part of the Masonic pyramid that in reality is composed by people that join not only for the alleged prestige such association brings to the members, but also with the general idea of being a good and caring organization for the well-being of the planet. In base of such a system, so becomes evident that the ruling elite was capable of keeping control over the system they administrated. We also know that for centuries, that is also being a division in the economic power system that was keeping the all structure from being overtaken by the pure madness of absolute dictatorial system based on total repression of all beings, and that such a balance was kept through the use of the banking system till the year 2001 when the system was changed with the creation of the European currency. After the beginning of the euro, the system had shifted in the hands of a society that after tens of years of invading and brainwashing the minds of Europeans through the use of horrific stories of discrimination and Holocaust, became blind and allowed them to take over the entire monetary system of the planet. The design of the money structure that had been operating in the end of the 20th and beginning of 21st century became a monster that instead of providing the necessary resources to harmonize and evolve with the medicine and the technology for the evolution and the cleanup of the environment, tied a rope on the neck of entire nations. It has been shown in the history of the 20th and beginning of 21st century that beside the rope on the neck of the private believers or investors that became subject of the game of banks that by declaring to have lost all assets can steal every asset of the investors and then instead of being made pay back the loss of the little and some big investors, get bonus from sovereign nations for their fraudulent doing. Sovereign nations are also subjected to such a rope on the neck of their own citizens by allowing so-called ratings managed by companies that follow their own economic gains and support itself by the manipulation of entire societies. The terrifying facts that have been keeping our planet victim of a system controlled for the repression of the souls instead of being aimed for the completion of all the cells that form the universe is a one that must be learned in its entirety in order to bring about a universal state of education to the better system. One system where no error can happen is one reality that science can prove for all. If no external influences other than the good natural ones. To understand the depth of the inhumane design created by those entities which controlled the world through fear and deception. By creating the basis for a monetary system based on debt and paper, the empty system in the hands of the few became sold to the entire world, creating an invisible force that could not only influence but also create its own governmental theater from where they have been promulgating a genocidal agenda aimed at population reduction for the control of the masses by means of lies and terror. By manipulating information system that their mass media imposes on the crowds, they became able to impose their views and designs on all issues that involve society, and by imposing their agenda and world of illusion on everybody that inhabit the land, they have been using the economic resources to push towards privatization of commune resources. One secret technique used more and more to control people thinking is achieved through the implementation of audio and magnetic sequencers that broadcast frequencies and sounds aimed at groups or at particular individuals in order to block their natural thinking activities and replace them with the more powerful induced artificial ones. Those machine and antennas are so broadcasting thoughts that the individual target innocently thinks as its own. Those machines are also used to pilot the dreams of the targeted individuals, and by so doing are capable to induce any the targeted individuals to believe whatever it is broadcasted to his mind. A way to spot those type of devices' activities is by reflecting on one's own thought in time in which it is evident that the natural thinking is being taken over, and realizing that the own brain is being forcefully blocked from thinking while words are pouring out. Those machine and devices are also used to push individuals to commit crimes that are usually recorded by those who using such devices in order to be able to blackmail the individuals targeted with the idea of being quiet about certain matters or otherwise being convicted for those crimes they have committed under the influence of the devices. Through the use of such sequencers and devices, it is also possible to remotely inure individuals to overeat, making them weak and obese, or doing the opposite by depressing the individuals targeted in stopping them from eating food or making them restless or sleepy. With the aim to force a system to turn everybody in society to be enslaved by a system of depression, they have been also able to convince the masses that their agenda was aimed at the well-being of society, while instead clearly proved itself to be not based on humanity, but strictly on individual gains. This shows how it became direct consequence of the misuse of technology, the great threat to the existence of life itself. Just like those electromagnetic devices can be used for good reasons, like in medical application, also, the other extremely powerful technologies like the nuclear one can be used to create systems that can allow travel in space and more, and we can see how if the original meaning of the application of those technologies becomes changed from its original meaning, and instead of being developed for the help and evolution becomes used for creating weapons, it turns its means from good to its opposite. Furthermore, we can see that a system based on armament and control induced through unnatural ways brings the societies to a state of regression in the scale of evolution to such an extent that can easily see to the total destruction. Another example of the danger and harm caused by those whom try to control the masses through means of terror and deception is shown in the fact that they have always been creating insane laws to prevent the natural evolution of good societies, and even going as far as deliberately poisoning the masses through the use of chemical and bacteriological toxins made legal, like for example the fluoridification of drinking water and many of the so-called vaccination programs. One proof the absurdity and power of such a society is shown in the obscene to use one of their creation they call Codex Alimentarius, an organization that exercises its power by creating laws to take over the rights of farming over all beings living in what they call the World Trade Organization members countries. The same entity who is also known for writing laws that control and patent seeds in a system of enforced terrorism even on the farmers. One particular case that further proves the bad intention of such a system is the one to impose the use of genetically modified foods and beverages and declares poisons that used to be illegal and radiation to be legal. This is also clearly done in order to allow the chemical companies to get rid of toxins and shorten the lifespan of the inhabitants of the planet. An example of an attempt by such group that made history is when in the beginning of the 21st century they tried to outlaw the growing of natural antibiotic, going as far as declaring that only pharmaceutical companies should have the right to grow medical plants, including in this case onions and garlic, because of their high containment of natural antibiotics. This case shows us how important it is to make sure that genuinely of the system that other ways can, instead of helping, destroy all that this planet has achieved in years of evolution. To realize the extent of danger that a society based only on economic power is a factor to be accepted for what it is, and to make sure that such a situation could not re-happen, we must be aware of the consequences that was bringing. Similar institutions, not just like those that are considered authorities for the rating of the banks and the banking system, have also taken over the allegedly democratic voting system by declaring the results of election much before the vote, and by so doing are able to convince the members of the society of results that are often not even checked. Such repression are also not clearly understood by many because of the state of fear that entire nation on planet Earth have been suffering. It become evident in fact how by the end of few sick individuals that steals and uses the resources for funding wars and destruction and gain even more economic power from the destruction they create. The morphing of the old system into a new one that truly share its richness with all its members, we must be able to end the fears and turn the wheel of well-being by investing not in the criminalization and selfish exploitation of a society and its resources, but instead of bringing the necessary healing for the well-being of its members and therefore enrich the life of all being. As history teaches us, we learn that extreme tyranny has always ended in the collapse of those tyrannic society by the end of the people. In the end of the 20th and beginning of the 21st century, the first time in history became evident to all mankind that the powers exercised by those in control of the economic powers had gone behind reason by advertising wars through the control of the media outlets and their capability for the divulgation of what became evident for everyone as pro-war industry propaganda. Became also clear that if instead of taking down heads like in the French Revolution we use them and make them use their resources to repair the damages suffered by our planet and its inhabitants, we can guarantee a positive outcome that would include everyone. By allowing the redemption and guide the changes through a concept of ending all conflicts and work together, we create one essential place where the only ones who have been creating wrong would be able to find the way to repair the damages that our planet have been suffering and obtaining positive outcome in a quick and swift way, allowing a positive outcome that would inspire everyone in the beginning where the well-being of our planet and all its inhabitants. By cancelling out all debts and recycling the unused or misused capitals, we can provide to all being with the necessary comforts to assure a happy and healthy life that bestows the symbol of a terrestrial paradise that is for all. This is something that will set in motion a motor that transforms that what is being spoiled into and gave us the chance to clean up and restore our planet for reaching the resonance, the echo through creation in the tune of harmony with the cosmos that will open its doors to welcome us in the next dimension of understanding and being. According to calculations made, the time of changes from the Dark Ages had to be preceded by events that will set the beings which inhabit our planet in a commune global understanding of the history and the same understanding based on the knowledge. Because of the essential need to stop the wrongdoing and begin the necessary healing that this planet, its inhabitants, and beyond needs to survive and find the tune of harmony that is necessary in order to assure the blossoming and continuation in the new era that is called eternity, and through its knowledge and science in harmony with the elements and nature will assure the evolution of all into what can guarantee the continuation of life. The era that will sign the end of all that is evil and distorted from the harmonic resonance of the sound of life itself.